Hey, Joe here from Home Studio Corner. I've shown you my studio, but what if you're in a typical bedroom studio? How do you set that up? Well, today we're going to dive into that and show you a quick and dirty bedroom studio setup. The majority of home studios are in a single bedroom like this. I've lived in many different places and I've had my home studio in many different rooms, so I'm pretty qualified to talk about how to maximize a small bedroom space like this. Up first, we got to get rid of the bed. Couldn't quite fit the bed out the door. Just pretend it's not in here. This is the room, okay? Not a very big room. It's slightly rectangular in shape, and as you can hear, it sounds amazing. Now, this room is small, which already poses some limitations on what we can do. But the bigger problem is this. Just listen. We've got drywall on 4 walls. We've got a drywall ceiling. Thankfully, there's carpet on the floor, but it is very live sounding. And what happens when a room sounds like this, everything you record in this room with a microphone is going to sound like this. And that's not going to be a cool sound. A lot of people think, oh, can I just put up one of those reflection filters and then I can record in this space? No, you can't. There's so much sound. Like it feels weird just talking right now because I hear it bouncing off these side walls and coming back, and it just freaks me out. Everything you record in here, even if you surround the microphone with some foam, is gonna sound like this room. So what we have to do is treat this room to at least cut down on some of those reflections. Okay, I'm back in the other room. Sounds so much better in here. Partially because this room is bigger, partially because there's drop tile ceiling, and partially because I've got some treatment in the room. Now, I am not a huge acoustic treatment buff. I know that it's important, and I know that any room can be improved with proper acoustic treatment. What do I mean when I say acoustic treatment? I talk about things like foam at like the kind of the base level, or these bigger like fiberglass panels, or custom built stuff that has a lot of absorption that can absorb some of the sound in the room so that not so much is bouncing around the room. It becomes especially problematic in smaller rooms like that one where the sounds are just going nuts. So we've got to find ways to tame them. For this video, I'm going to do a quick and dirty treatment approach for that room, something that I would do given the things that I already have available to me. The most important of which is this sucker. I've featured this in videos before and you can't even see it very well. This is a wooden frame. It's 7 feet tall. So I'm 5'10". It is another, okay, it's not really, maybe it's not 7 feet tall. It's very tall. And it's also on casters. It has wheels. And it's just a basic wooden frame. See, it's not that fancy. That I had a guy here in Nashville make for me that has, essentially, this is just bed sheets with a bunch of insulation inside, and it's about 3 inches thick. This blocks and absorbs a lot of sound, and I can roll it around the room. So you tend to think of gobos as being used for recording, so I can put a gobo between me and the guitar player, and it'll block some of my vocal from getting in his guitar mic and his guitar from getting in my vocal mic. I use it like that sometimes, but the majority of the time, I'm using it to just deaden a space, either for mixing or for recording, to give me a less reflective sound like we're getting in the other room. So for example, you're listening to me, you can hear me clearly, and then if I move this, now you can't hear me nearly as well because this thing was blocking all the sound. So, how would I go about putting this into that room? Well, first let's set up a little mini studio space and then we'll go from there. Okay? Look how far. Step 1, we need a desk. Hold on. Now we need some recording equipment. We say what's on our mind, no matter who we are. This is actually almost my identical setup when I was in college. Little computer, these are the actual tiny speakers I had, USB audio interface, and a microphone. That's enough to do a lot of damage in a studio. Now, why did I pick this wall as opposed to this wall? Good rule of thumb, if you have a rectangular shaped room, you should put your desk on the shorter wall so that your speakers are firing down the longest dimension of the room. In a really small room like this, it probably doesn't make a ton of difference, but that's a good rule of thumb to start with. Now we have to turn our focus to how to deaden the sound of this room a little bit. We don't want to make it a completely dead sounding room. It's okay to have a little room sound. Right now there's too much room sound. So there's two purposes for treatment in a room like this. One is to deaden the sound of the room and to keep as much of the room out of the microphone when we're recording. If you record vocals in a room like this and then you add any compression to it, all you're going to hear is the room. Now on a certain project that might be cool, but not on every one. The second thing we're using acoustic treatment for is to allow us to hear those speakers better. Right now the sound comes out of the speakers and we're hearing that sound, but we're also hearing that sound bouncing off the side walls and the ceiling and the floor and the back wall. We can't do something about all of those things, but we can do something about a little bit of that, and the result will be we can hear the speakers more clearly. We're hearing more of the direct sound of the speakers, less of the sound bouncing around the room, which allows us to hear things more accurately, which will help us to mix better because we're hearing more accurately what's actually happening in the mix. If we tried to mix a song in this room right now with no treatment, we'd be completely lost because there's so much sound of the room. We're probably hearing 30% speakers, 70% room. We want to change that ratio so we're hearing more and more of the speakers, less and less of the room. The easiest place to start is on the side walls. There's an old mirror trick. Sit in the mix position and have somebody run a mirror along the wall. And when you look in the mirror and you can see the speakers, that's a reflection point where the sound is bouncing off of that and coming back to your ears. That's a place where you want to hang some treatment. Well, I like to go a little bigger than just the mirror size. So I'm going to roll one of those gobos here, put one on either side, and it's going to really deaden up the sound so I can hear the speakers better. Hold on. Ooh, I've got something. Already it's sounding better. Let's switch to the other side. This room suddenly sounds tight. Just right, I mean, you can still hear some of the room, but it is so much tighter and cleaner, and I can hear my speakers so much better with just these two pieces. Now, I said a second ago that you want to leave some room sound. You don't want it to sound super dead. I don't know if actually I agree with that, because a room like that will never sound good. Drywall does not sound good. Small rooms typically don't sound good. So I'm okay with trying to deaden it as much as possible. So maybe grab something like this. These are made by the same guy. Same concept here, it's just smaller. It's a 4-foot by 2-foot panel. I have a few extras. So I would take something like these and then just hang them a little more evenly around the room, maybe along the back wall, although there's a closet door there. Maybe in just some of this bigger space over here. Let me show you. So something like this, we could hang one there. We could also hang one here. And if you're handy enough, maybe you could hang one from the ceiling. I'm not handy enough for that. But the more absorption we can get into this room, the more the entire room is gonna chill out a little bit and give us something that's usable for recording. You know what? I changed my mind. I was talking about that 4-foot by 2-foot panels, and that's kind of the typical shape for a lot of studios. So they'll hang those about halfway up the wall, so it gives you a nice height to maybe capture some absorption from a vocal and like a guitarist sitting down. I would rather have more coverage. So I actually had a guy build these for me. These I think actually are 7 feet. It's the same idea as this. It's just bigger like the gobo, and I can turn it up really tall like this, and I can just lean it up against a wall. And I've got 2 of them. So listen with me now to the sound of this room. Can you hear that? Remember how it sounded at the beginning of this video? How it was way echoey and super reverberant? It's not anymore. It's not perfect, but we're able to really deaden the room to where I could get usable recordings out of this space. With these really tall guys, if you wanted to try to do more of a bass trap with it, you could put it into the corner and have it going vertical there. I put a couple of these in here. I could hang them up higher to get more absorption up here at eye level, or I could just leave them there. Just all 6 pieces are working together just to deaden the sound of this room and make it into a usable space. Is it pretty? No, not necessarily, but it's totally doable. And if you can build these panels, you can have really good absorption that's probably a lot better than the foam stuff you would get, and you can get some pretty good results. Okay, now here's the best part. If you use rolling gobos like this, then you can move them around depending on what you're doing in the studio. So when I'm mixing, I'm sitting here and they're taking absorption from the side. When I'm recording, I can back up a little bit and I can bring them in and turn it into kind of a mini booth of sorts that really gives me a nice tight sound. I mean, we can close it all the way in. And now I'm in a booth. We essentially create our own ISO booth by just bringing in some thick absorption around us. So we don't have to necessarily go in the closet, because smaller closets can pose other weird problems. But we can get these in and get a pretty tight recording. Whew, I'm exhausted. There's a mattress behind me. Is it the best sounding room you've ever heard? No, it's not. Does it sound way better than it did before we started moving stuff in there? Absolutely. The thing is, most home studios will not have a great sounding room. You hear about drum rooms that just sound amazing. You and I probably aren't going to have that available to us. So our job is to make the room be as little a part of the equation as possible, and that's how you do it. You absolutely could make some great sounding recordings in that room as it stands right now. Are there areas to improve? Yes, of course. But that's a great starting point. And you only need to be able to build some panels, get some fiberglass, hire a buddy to do it. It's not super difficult and shouldn't be too terribly expensive, and it's completely worth the effort, because otherwise there's really no point in even recording in a room that doesn't have any treatment. Now, maybe you don't have to make the treatment. Maybe you go grab the mattress, put it up against the wall, grab a bunch of thick blankets and hang them from the other wall. The concept is the same. I just like the idea of rolling things around and having a nice thick chunk of insulation around me to allow for some of that sound to be absorbed. But the concept is the same. Find a way to deaden the sound of that room so that your recordings stay a little more pure. Does it sound like that's a lot of work? It is. Joe's a little sweaty. You know what's not a lot of work? Downloading my free recording cheat sheet. Head over to recordingcheatsheet.com. It's completely free, it's not terribly long, and it'll give you 12 different habits that if you can master even just a handful of them, you'll have better recordings by the weekend, especially if your room sounds like that. All right, that's it for me. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Bye. Hey Siri, text Pam, I'm so sweaty. I'm so sweaty!